Chapter 2. The Science of Deduction. We met the next day as agreed and inspected the rooms at number 221 B. Baker Street. They consisted of 2 comfortable bedrooms and a single, large, airy sitting room, cheerfully furnished and lit by 2 broad windows. The apartment was so desirable and the rent so reasonable when shared between us that we closed the deal on the spot and moved in immediately. I brought my things from the hotel that evening, and Sherlock Holmes followed the next morning with several boxes and portmanteaus. For a day or 2, we were busy unpacking and arranging our belongings. Once finished, we gradually began to settle into our new surroundings. Holmes was an easy man to live with. He was quiet and followed a regular routine. He was rarely up after 10 at night, and he had always finished breakfast and gone out before I rose in the morning. Sometimes he spent his day at the chemical laboratory, sometimes in the dissecting rooms, and occasionally he took long walks that seemed to lead him into the poorest sections of the city. His energy was inexhaustible when he was working, but occasionally a reaction would set in. For days, he would lie on the sofa in the sitting room, hardly speaking or moving from morning till night. At such times, his eyes had such a dreamy, vacant expression that I might have suspected him of using drugs if the overall discipline and cleanliness of his life hadn't made that idea seem impossible. As the weeks passed, my interest in him and my curiosity about his goals grew deeper. His appearance alone was enough to catch the attention of any observer. He was over 6 feet tall and so excessively thin that he seemed even taller. His eyes were sharp and piercing, except during the periods of inactivity I mentioned. His thin, hawk-like nose gave him an air of alertness and decision, and his square chin marked him as a man of great determination. His hands were usually stained with ink and chemicals, yet he possessed an extraordinary delicacy of touch, which I often observed as he handled his fragile scientific instruments. You might think me a hopeless busybody, but this man fascinated me. I often tried to break through his secrecy regarding his private life. However, before you judge me, remember how aimless my own life was. My health prevented me from going out unless the weather was perfect, and I had no friends to break the monotony of my daily existence. Under these circumstances, I welcomed the mystery surrounding my companion and spent much of my time trying to solve it. He was not studying medicine. He had confirmed this himself, nor did he seem to be pursuing any degree in science or any other field that would lead to a traditional career. Yet his passion for certain subjects was remarkable. Within his eccentric interests, his knowledge was so vast and detailed that he often left me astonished. Surely no man would work so hard to gain such precise information, unless he had a definite purpose. People who read without a plan rarely possess such exact knowledge. No one burdens their mind with small details unless they have a very good reason. His ignorance, however, was as remarkable as his knowledge. He knew almost nothing of contemporary literature, philosophy, or politics. When I quoted Thomas Carlyle, he asked me in the most naive way who he was and what he had done. But my surprise peaked when I discovered he was ignorant of the Copernican theory and the structure of the solar system. That any educated person in the 19th century did not know the Earth travels around the sun seemed extraordinary to me. "You appear to be astonished," he said, smiling at my expression. "Now that I do know it, I shall do my best to forget it." "To forget it? You see," he explained, "I believe that a man's brain is originally like a small, empty attic, and you have to furnish it as you choose. A fool takes in every piece of junk he comes across, so the knowledge that might be useful to him gets crowded out, or, at best, buried under a pile of other things. A skillful workman is very careful about what he takes into his brain attic. He only keeps the tools he needs for his work, but he has a large variety of them, all in perfect order. It is a mistake to think that this little room has elastic walls. There comes a time when for every new piece of information, you forget something you knew before. It is vital, therefore, not to let useless facts push out the useful ones. "But the solar system," I protested. "What does it matter to me?" He interrupted impatiently. "You say we go around the sun. If we went around the moon, it wouldn't make a bit of difference to me or my work." I was about to ask what that work was, but his manner showed me the question would be unwelcome. I thought about our conversation and tried to draw my own conclusions. He said he would only learn things that helped his work. Therefore, all the knowledge he possessed had to be useful to him. I listed the subjects where he was exceptionally well informed. I even took a pencil and wrote them down. I couldn't help but smile when I finished the list. Sherlock Holmes, his limits: 1. Literature, none. 2. Philosophy, none. 3. Astronomy, none. 4. Politics, weak. 5. Botany, variable, knows a lot about belladonna, opium, and poisons, knows nothing of practical gardening. 6. Geology, practical, but limited. Can distinguish different soils at a glance. He has shown me mud stains on his trousers and told me, based on their color and consistency, which part of London they came from. 7. Chemistry, profound. 8. Anatomy, accurate but disorganized. 9. Sensational literature, immense. He seems to know every detail of every crime committed in this century. 10. Music, plays the violin well. 11. Physical skills, expert at boxing, sword fighting, and single stick. 12. Law, good practical knowledge of British law. I threw the list into the fire in despair. If I can't figure out what career needs all these skills, I said to myself, I might as well give up. I mentioned his violin playing. It was as eccentric as his other skills. He could play difficult pieces well, but when left alone, he rarely played recognizable music. He would lean back in his armchair, close his eyes, and scrape carelessly at the fiddle across his knee. Sometimes the notes were sad and deep. Other times they were fast and cheerful. They clearly reflected his thoughts. I might have found these solos annoying, but he usually ended by playing a series of my favorite songs as an apology for testing my patience. During the first week, we had no visitors, but soon I found that he had many acquaintances from all levels of society. There was a sallow, rat-faced man named Mr. Lestrade who visited several times a week. One morning, a fashionably dressed young woman called and stayed for half an hour. That same afternoon, a gray-haired, poorly dressed man who looked like a peddler arrived, followed by an elderly woman. On another occasion, an old white-haired gentleman had an interview with him, and later, even a railway porter. Whenever these visitors arrived, Holmes would ask to use the sitting room, and I would retreat to my bedroom. I have to use this room as a place of business, he told me. These people are my clients. Again, I wanted to ask him a direct question, but I felt it would be rude to force him to confide in me. On the 4th of March, I woke up earlier than usual and found Sherlock Holmes still at breakfast. The landlady was used to me sleeping late, so my coffee wasn't ready. I rang the bell and curtly said I was ready for breakfast. Then I picked up a magazine from the table to pass the time while Holmes ate his toast. One article was marked with a pencil, "The Book of Life." It claimed that an observant man could learn a vast amount by systematically examining everything he saw. It seemed like a mix of brilliance and absurdity. The reasoning was intense, but the conclusions seemed far-fetched. The writer claimed he could read a man's deepest thoughts by a momentary expression or the twitch of a muscle. He argued that deception was impossible to a trained observer. From a drop of water, the writer claimed, a logician could infer the existence of an Atlantic or a Niagara without ever seeing them. All life is a chain. Its nature is revealed by a single link. He argued that the science of deduction could only be mastered by long study. He suggested that when meeting someone, one should learn at a glance their history and profession. By a man's fingernails, his coat sleeve, his boots, the skin on his thumb and finger, his expression, all these things reveal his trade. What total nonsense, I cried, slamming the magazine down. I've never read such rubbish. What is it? Holmes asked. This article, I said, pointing at it with my spoon. I see you've marked it. I don't deny it's well written, but it's irritating. It's clearly the theory of some armchair dreamer. It isn't practical. I'd like to see him in a crowded subway car and ask him to name the trades of all his fellow travelers. I'd bet 1,000 to 1 against him. You would lose your money, Holmes remarked calmly. Actually, I wrote that article myself. You? Yes, I have a talent for both observation and deduction. The theories I express there, which seem so impossible to you, are actually very practical. I depend on them for my living. How? I asked. And I have a trade of my own. I believe I'm the only one in the world. I am a consulting detective. In London, we have many government and private detectives. When they are stuck, they come to me, and I put them on the right track. They show me the evidence, and with my knowledge of crime history, I can usually solve it. Crimes are very similar. If you know the details of 1,000 cases, it's easy to solve the 1,001st. Lestrade is a well-known detective, but he got confused recently over a forgery case, which is why he was here. And those other people? Mostly sent by private agencies. They are people in trouble who need help. I listen to their stories, give my comments, and take my fee. Do you mean to say, I asked, that without leaving your room, you can solve a mystery that others can't, even though they've seen the scene themselves? Exactly. I have an intuition for it. Occasionally a case is more complex, and I have to go see things for myself. I have a lot of special knowledge that makes it easier. Those rules of deduction that you mocked are invaluable to me. Observation is second nature. You were surprised when I told you that you had come from Afghanistan. Someone told you, no doubt? Not at all. I knew you came from Afghanistan. Through long habit, the train of thought ran so quickly through my mind that I reached the conclusion without even noticing the steps. But there were steps. My reasoning was, here is a medical man with a military air, an army doctor then. He has just come from the tropics because his face is dark, but that isn't his natural skin tone. His wrists are fair. He has suffered hardship and illness, as his tired face shows. His left arm is injured and held stiffly. Where in the tropics could an English army doctor have seen hardship and been wounded? Clearly in Afghanistan. The whole thought took less than a second. I then said you were from Afghanistan, and you were amazed. It's simple enough when you explain it, I said, smiling. You remind me of Edgar Allan Poe's Dupin. I didn't think such people existed outside of books. Holmes rose and lit his pipe. You probably think you're complimenting me, he observed, but in my opinion Dupin was quite inferior. That trick of his, breaking into a friend's thoughts after 15 minutes of silence, is very superficial. He had some talent, but he was no phenomenon. What about Lecoq? I asked. Is he a good detective? Holmes sniffed. Lecoq was a bungler. He only had energy. That book made me sick. The problem was identifying a prisoner. I could have done it in 24 hours. Lecoq took 6 months. It's a textbook on what to avoid. I was annoyed to hear my favorite characters treated this way. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. He may be clever, I thought, but he is certainly arrogant. There are no crimes and no criminals these days, Holmes complained. What's the use of having brains in this profession? I could make my name famous, but there are no cases to solve. Only simple crimes with motives so obvious even the police can see through them. I was still annoyed by his attitude and changed the subject. I wonder what that man is looking for, I asked, pointing to a tall, plainly dressed man walking slowly down the street, looking at the house numbers. He held a large blue envelope. You mean the retired sergeant of Marines, Holmes said. He's just bragging, I thought. He knows I can't prove him wrong. Just then, the man saw our number and ran across the street. We heard a loud knock and heavy steps on the stairs. For Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the man said, entering and handing my friend the letter. This was my chance to humble him. May I ask, my friend, I said in my kindest voice, what is your trade? Messenger, sir, he said gruffly. My uniform is being repaired. And what was your previous job? I asked, glancing at Holmes. A sergeant, sir. Royal Marine Light Infantry. No answer? Thank you, sir. He saluted and was gone.